All right, well, no holidays off from the campaign trail for the Republican presidential candidates. 5 candidates marching in parades in New Hampshire, including Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. And 3 more candidates celebrating the 4th of July by attending parades in Iowa, including former Vice President Mike Pence. At least 5 candidates say they've met the fundraising benchmarks to participate in the first Republican primary debate next month. Joining me now, former Arkansas governor and former presidential candidate Mike Huckabee. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Cheryl. Listening to all that talk about Meta, I'm thinking maybe I should get rid of my space account that I've had for all these years. And I'm only kidding.
So big, it was, again, 4th of July. These candidates were getting out there. You know, Mike Pence looked pretty comfortable walking in that parade and saying, you know, this is kind of a friendly territory for him. What do you make so far of what we're seeing out of the candidates as we get very close now to that first big debate, which is next month?
Well, having been through a couple of cycles, I can tell you this is the fun part of the campaign. It's the getting out in states like Iowa and New Hampshire and South Carolina, shaking hands, talking to people, having honest, real, and genuine conversations with people who are welders, farmers, housewives, teachers, firemen. It's an extraordinary experience to do that. And then comes the debates. And that's where it gets all serious. And that's what's going to really start defining who makes it and who gets kind of bumped out of the process.
The former President Trump, he wasn't anywhere to be found. He didn't.
Well, he doesn't
there.
have to be. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, Donald Trump is in a position where he can create his own events. He'll have thousands of people showing up for a rally that he announces the day before. It's not necessary for him, in order to get publicity, to go and walk in a parade, and chances are that's just not his thing. But it's a different dynamic, and it was in 2016 and in 2020 as well. He doesn't hide out in his basement, and he doesn't, drive up to a drive-in rally with 12 cars in a parking lot. He shows up, he does shake hands, but he's in a position he can do his own event. So that's a space that he has all by himself. The big question, will he show up for the debates in August? And I'm not sure he will. I'm not sure he needs to. There's no point if all he's going to be is the punching bag for the other people who qualify, which right now is only about 5 people.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also, too, you know, to be clear, I mean, he's gone through 2 indictments now, one in New York and then one, the federal indictment, and his poll numbers went up and his fundraising went up, which has been interesting to watch. I want to ask you about this new Gallup poll, finding confidence in the U.S. government is at its lowest levels compared to other G7 countries. In 2022, 31% of Americans had confidence in the U.S. 69% of Americans said they did not. Governor Huckabee, your thoughts on this really lack of belief, I guess, in our country?
Well, the government has done a really good job of destroying our confidence in what they do. Let's first of all look at the justice system. People look at what's happening, whether it's to Donald Trump or to Roger Stone or to Peter Navarro, and they say, you know, that's just not the same way that people are treated on the other side. You know, they're going to rename the White House the White Powder House if things keep going like they are. But nobody gets arrested over there. Nobody really gets in that much trouble. We're seeing a double standard of justice. We see the weaponization and the politicization of government agencies. And so it's hard to have a lot of confidence and trust in government. And Congress has hearings, but nothing happens, no accountability, nothing changes. The donor class runs the political class, is not the other way around. And as a result, I can understand why people are cynical. They see that the press doesn't do their job. They don't fairly and adequately and objectively report facts. They weigh in on their own opinion. And then you have the big tech companies like Meta and others who censor and who collude with the government to censor. And you add all that up, and it's amazing that there's 31% of the people who do have trust in government.
Yeah. And I did hear the pun about the white powder at the White House. We'll see what that investigation finds, but yeah. Very well said. I do want to ask you about this, though. We've been talking about this morning. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is being criticized by some Republicans for a campaign video taking aim at former President Trump's previous support for the LGBT community. Many call this homophobic. I want to play a short clip of that ad and get your reaction on the other side, Governor.
I will do everything in my power to protect our LGBTQ citizens.
Did you see the ad, Governor, and what did you make of it? Because it just seemed a little, frankly, strange, the entire thing. And now DeSantis is being called homophobic.
I don't think DeSantis is homophobic, but it probably wasn't the best idea for an ad, in part because you win elections when you add people to your voting rolls. You don't win elections when you keep subtracting them. There are people who don't necessarily agree with the idea of some of the agenda of the more radical versions of LGBTQIA+, however many letters we have now in the alphabet for it. But the fact is, there are many people in that community who are conservative and vote Republican. You want those voters. And just in the same way that Donald Trump was very clear in saying he would protect Christian voters, pro-life voters, and he did, I think what he's saying is that he wants to protect the rights of every American citizen to do the life they want to do, to live like they want to live, as long as it doesn't interfere and disrupt someone else. That really is kind of the heart of what America's about.
Kara Frederick's on set with me, and Kara, again, that ad it's just strange. I think that's the best way to describe that ad. Well, and it's backfiring.
Yeah, well, that leads me to a question. Governor, what do you think about Ron DeSantis' strategy thus far? We had the glitchy Twitter rollout, but however, I do think it was a nod to sort of his unconventional nature. He's taking risks, he's taking chances. Is this working for him, or are these duds?
Well, the poll numbers don't indicate that he's rising. It really indicates that at best he's in a stall, and in some polls he's actually falling. And some of the other candidates are getting more attention. So I'm not sure who's running his campaign and what their strategy is, but I would say that he probably needs to make some course corrections, because at this point he's so far behind Donald Trump. And some of the other candidates are beginning to approach his numbers. So he's no longer that clear alternative to Donald Trump. He's one of several alternatives to Donald Trump, to those who want one. And that's going to be a real challenge for him. It's not that he has to face Donald Trump and fear something coming at his face. He's got to fear there's another 15 people who are going to be coming at him from his back.
Governor Mike Huckabee, it's always great to speak to you. Thank you so much for being here.